Let's start it off with perhaps the most important thing of the day. The most important thing of the day is the fact that CME is going to be closing the monthly today in 15 hours, 44 minutes, and 37 seconds from the moment of this recording. And that will be somewhere around like 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, I do believe. And it is the monthly, which is a very powerful time frame. And the reason why this is very powerful and very important and a big focus for this stream and probably the streams to come in the next month is that if this one thing that we're going to talk about in a second here happens, I would look at that as the next big macro signal that Bitcoin very likely does trade significantly lower. If it doesn't happen, I believe that it keeps open the hopium. But if it does happen, I will be looking for rallies to essentially enter into perhaps long-term trending down positions. Of course, that's a more direct statement, which I typically don't like to make on a channel like this because it's just wise not to. But in this case right here, we do see specifically that CME is dancing right around the monthly white moving average. That is a 20 simple moving average. The reason why that is important right now is simply because of this. If I can bring up the right chart over here, it is because we do have a setup on the macro scale here that has happened 3 times in Bitcoin's past. It starts with the monthly MACD. Very, very simple here. We've seen it cross to the downside 3 times in Bitcoin's history, not counting the one that happened in January and February. And all 3 times then were fully validated by a closure on the monthly below the white 20 simple. So we see it over here. Of course, in 2014 first. So the green vertical bar represents the MACD crossing down. Then this obviously closing below. And then over the next few months, Bitcoin does fall down to that green moving average, which is a 55 exponential moving average. Now you can see that it takes about, a little bit over half a year before Bitcoin gets going again, but, it does get going again. So there's the hopium on the other side. If this were to happen. At the same point, we see the same thing over here in June of 2018. Monthly MACD crosses the downside, 1, 2, 3, 4 months dancing around that white 20 simple, closes ever so slightly below right here. Let me actually adjust that. There we go. And then actually directly in the next couple of months, Bitcoin does find its lows, and it takes, again, about 4 or 5 months before it gets going again to the upside. This next iteration and the last iteration that we do have fully is from January to February. And you can see that Bitcoin did close the monthly below the 20 simple right here. Now, this one happened all in one fell swoop, so a little bit too fast for that one to play out. Obviously, if this current one's going to play out, it would imply that we're going to see like a wick down all the way to about $24,000 to $25,000 today. I think that's extremely unlikely. But again, did happen over here as well as a long-term corrective target. And for what it's worth right now, again, we do see this same sort of setup. We see the monthly MACD crossing the downside, and we see that Bitcoin is right on the 20 simple. And the reason why I'm calling out CME is because CME closes its monthly today, contrary to spot price action, which will not close it today. It'll close it tomorrow on the actual end of the month. But the reason why this is important is because CME's closure will drastically influence whatever spot does. I would go as far to say that wherever CME closes, that is probably exactly where, or I wouldn't say exactly, but very, very likely around where spot will close as well. So that brings up the question, what would that number be? What is essentially very concerning right here for the Boo laws would be any sort of a closure below about 40,250, essentially the high of yesterday for today. I'd even go as far to say that any sort of a closure below about $40,000 would be very, very concerning. Or obviously that would be concerning, but I need to rephrase that statement. If Bitcoin could close above about 40,000 bucks, I do believe that would keep the Boo law hopium alive. And so that will be, again, decided today in about 15 hours and 41 minutes from now. So do keep an eye on that, as that is going to be a major driver for the analyses to come. On top of that, we should also be aware that if we are going to bring up the hopium case, that Bitcoin does still have hopium here. No doubt about that, as long as the daily stochastic momentum remains postured to the upside on this vol versus stochastic chart that we've been looking at. Still looking at a 20% move from this, but if Bitcoin, let's say, closes the monthly below that level and then we continue with the upside momentum, well, I'm probably going to be looking at that next rally as a rally to very likely sell, and vice versa for the opposite side. The question is which one happens first, obviously. In this case, we do see that the daily volatility represented by BBWP over here is expanding off the lows. I haven't really seen anything like super precise just yet, like we get in the past, where it essentially explodes on that first couple moves for about 20 to 30 percentile. And for right now, it's still in single digits, actually. So I don't think that we've necessarily seen the expansion phase just yet. So I don't believe that interpretation is fully formed as of right now. But for the last 10 iterations, on average, there has been about a 20% move from the local high or local low where that expansion does happen typically happens over the course of about 10 to 14 days or so, which kind of does align with next week's catalytic event with the FOMC meeting on Wednesday, I do believe it is, which is very likely going to drive markets, especially after this last little earnings period. Anyways, for reference, the people who've been on this channel for the past couple months, you've seen several of these iterations alongside this. I believe we pointed them out, when it was relevant. And so you've seen this already happen. For the people who are new here, yeah, it takes a little bit of patience, which I actually have very little of. And but it does eventually happen. And again, out of 10 iterations, about 20% on average, some of them a little bit more, some of them a little bit less. But because this one has been this low for this long, I do believe it would be logical to state that, hey, the expansion from this, the resolution of the expansion from this, I should say, is likely going to be on the higher end of that, of that average. On top of that, we do see that out of the 8 of the last 10 iterations, the daily stochastic momentum direction has actually gotten the correct direction for that move. And as of right now, it's still pointed to the upside. So for right now, the Boolaws actually have a nice big point in their favor. Now, can that change around? Yes, it can change around. If we do see a daily closure below about 38,750, that would do it. That would do it and be very, very damning for the Boolaws, obviously in the short term. Very much negating any sort of potential rally into the 40,000s first before falling down, likely meeting the monthly chart that we were looking at earlier. So that's kind of what's at stake for today. But for right now, as long as Bitcoin's basically about $1,000 above where we're currently at, then that is a moot point. And also to the Boolaw's favor, we have a couple other things over here. One of them would be, of course, Dixie. Dixie, as we've been looking at, has hit the long-term macro target. Hey, that is not the right chart. Hold on, let's go to this one. I think it's on this chart right here. And let me just get rid of everything and we'll go to this one. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, there we go. Has hit basically the most the most long-term of targets right there at about $1.03 or so. Traditionally speaking, this is a strong pullback region. I've been kind of saying the same thing here ever since it got into about 101.5 or so. I was definitely wrong about that. But in this case, this was a pretty strong close yesterday, to be fair. The question is, does it pull back first before going for another move to the upside, which I strongly believe that it will long-term, but that probably takes years, if that. That's a good question. Traditionally speaking, though, I do have to look for a pullback here, and pullbacks could come even as far down as like 98 to 99 bucks. In fact, that would be a rather technical correction within this case. So within the context of that, that would likely help out Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, traditional markets, what have you. But until that actually does happen, there is still pressure on to the downside, obviously. So what does this likely equate to? Let's say if all of these signals play out, perhaps Bitcoin opens up on a nice bounce to start off May. Bounce could even come into the mid 40s, definitely possible. But as this is, a long-term uptrend and a reversal here with the quarterly showing significant upside probably in the years to come, just based off of, hidden bullish divergence on the quarterly, which has only happened one other time in history, and the extreme lows on quarterly BBWP. I do look for this to go probably $1.10, maybe even $1.20 in the years to come, maybe not years to come, like probably 5 to 10 years, to be fair. This is a quarterly after all, so it takes at least, takes quite a fair bit of time to even get one closure. But for right now, we have hit extremes on daily BBWP. I do still want to see this kind of grind it out on the extremes and then get below the moving average before I really look for that pullback to come. So as of right now, it's actually not, as of right now, we're actually not even getting that signal for what it's worth. But this, traditionally would be a good pullback region. So that's why I kind of hesitate on calling any major downside continuation like in the short term for Bitcoin right now, especially as long as Bitcoin's above about $39,000. Why is $39,000 relevant, or why do I keep on calling that area out? It's the same thing as yesterday, actually. Just looking at this region right here, structural support within this case, we do see, or if I was to put a fib on the shorter term timeframes, which is what we did yesterday, you'd see the, I think it was a 382 coming in around about 39,000 bucks. But most important, or I wouldn't say most importantly, but also of significant interest here is the fact that on the short term for funding rates, we do see positive rates yet again. That flipped around very, very fast. I believe that we tweeted this out on the new Twitter account, actually, which Elsa is managing, the Krown trading app Twitter account, which is actually growing really, really well. It's cool. But that switched around really, really fast, I guess right after I went to bed. Right here, where it did start to go from negative to positive. The negative rates from yesterday was what was making us say, hey, Bitcoin probably has another short-term move to the upside. I didn't really give any specific targets for that. But in this case, it looks like it even hit like the 40,400-ish region. So I can't claim victory for that. Obviously, that is an ego thing anyways. But what I can say, though, is that now that it has flipped to positive rates and, I would say significant positive rates, especially for the short term, that does bring up the probabilities that, we should be looking at a potential failure marked by a move and closure below $39,000. And that is also going to be strengthened by the case that the short-term time frame stochastic momentum is actually showing potential downside below on a 6 hour below 39,300 on a closing basis. Let me actually go to spot price action right here, see if it's the same. A little bit lower than that, 39.2 to be fair. 4 hour is going to be showing downside pressure below 39.5, which Bitcoin's ever so slightly above right now. And 3 hour is going to be showing about $40,000 actually. In hourly, I'm going to imagine it's probably correcting all the way down here. Yeah, below about downside pressure as long as Bitcoin's below 39,950 or so. So what does that essentially equate to? Well, it means that I'm actually giving Bitcoin a bit of a wider berth than maybe it deserves right now, but I still would say $39,000, big area. As long as Bitcoin's above there, I do believe hopium for, another rally into the shallow 40s is possible. But if Bitcoin starts to lose that region and we start to see the monthly close below that level tonight, and then especially tomorrow, that's going to really play into the long-term analysis that, the downside pressure is, there are more things pointed towards downside over time here. Probably not going to happen all in one day, obviously. But until then, I'll just be looking at the short terms as a bit of a range resolution, similar to before. In this case, we could actually move it up now because we do have a greater medium-term time frame range. That would imply a 4 hour closure above about, whatever our highs are right here, which is about 40,800, would imply, very likely another big extension move towards 42.5 to 43, which would actually be significant for the higher term timeframes. And by the same token, below $39,000, very likely another move back down around the lows of this blue box territory between about 37 to 37.5. Probably another short-term bounce there, and then we'll come back to it after that. Other than that, is there anything else that I want to be getting on to over here? I feel like I'm missing something. Yeah, 12 hours is going to make it kind of difficult for Bitcoin to really see major continuation to the downside in the short term. Other than that, I think that's a good place to kind of leave it off, and we will reference those closures tomorrow. So hopefully that was helpful, and there you go for Bitcoin, sirs and zers.